Assalamu alaikum students. Today our lecture is about voices which are active and passive. Let's begin with the definitions. The first definition is of active voice, which says verbs are written with the subject performing the process. For example, I read the paper. In this sentence, I is the subject, read is the verb, and I is the person who is performing the process, which is reading the paper. So this sentence is in active voice. Next we have passive voice. Verbs are written with the subject receiving the action expressed by the verb. For example, the paper was read by me. Next we have subject. Subject is the noun or its equivalent about which the sentence is written. It agrees with the verb. Object is the noun governed by an active verb or preposition. Here we have the difference between active and passive. Passive voice emphasizes the person or object receiving the action. So the main word in this whole sentence is object. It means that passive emphasis on object. For example, the game was won. Next we have active voice emphasizes the person or object performing the action. It means that the active voice focuses on the subject and not object for that matter. An action of a subject in relation to an object is expressed in two ways. These two ways of expressing action of a subject are known as voices. First voice is active and the second voice is passive. For example, I write a letter. It's an active voice. Why? Because we have subject I, then verb write, and then object a letter. Then we have the sentence in passive voice and it says a letter is written by me. First we have the object, then we have the auxiliary verb is, then we have third form of verb which is written of write, and then use of preposition by, and then we have object me. So when it comes to active voice and passive voice, we have experienced and we have seen certain changes. So it's all about active and passive, and now we will discuss about the changes, and we will read certain rules that are needed to be followed in order to change the active voice into passive voice or vice versa. Here we have the difference of sentence structure between active voice and passive voice. The structures of a same sentence for both voices are as follows. Active voice, subject plus verb plus object. If you recall the sentence, I write the letter or I write a letter, in this sentence first we have I, subject, write which is verb, a letter is object. Passive voice is object plus verb plus subject. It means that a letter is written by me. In this sentence, first we have object, then we have verb, and then subject. Remember that the meaning of the sentences would remain the same, only there would be the change in the expression of that sentence. We can change a sentence from active voice to passive voice by keeping in view certain rules. Rule number one is, as mentioned earlier, the structure of sentence will be reversed in passive voice. Reverse in which way? The places of the subject and the object will interchange. The subject will shift to the place of the object and the object will take the place of subject in passive voice. The first rule is interchanging the placement of subject and object. It means that subject would come in place of object and object would come in place of subject. For example, he buys a camera. He is subject, camera is object. Now we would interchange its position. A camera is bought by him. Here first we have object is bought by him. Him is the subject. So we have changed the places of subject and object. Here we have rule number 2, and it says only past participle form or third form of verb will always be used as main verb in passive voices for all tenses. No other form of verb will be used as main verb. It can be seen in all the examples given on this page. Rule number 3 is the word by will be used before subject in the passive voice. Up till now, we have discussed three rules. Rule number one is we will change the position of subject and object. Rule number two is we will always use third form of verb. Rule number three is we will use the preposition by uh, before subject in the passive voice. Examples are she drinks water, and passive voice is water is drunk by her. In this sentence, first of all, we have changed the subject and object places. For example, water has replaced she, and then we have used third form of verb of drink, which is drunk, and then we have used preposition by, and then we have used the objective form of she, which is her. So this is how we have to apply rule number 1, 2 and 3. Rule number 4 says other words such as with or to may also be used instead of word by, depending upon the subject of the sentence. These words are used in a very few cases. The word by is used in the most cases. As for example, active voice says I know him. In passive voice, it would be he is known to me. We will not use the word by after known. Next is water fills a tub. A tub is filled with water. In this sentence, water is the subject, tub is object, but when we will change the active into passive, we will use first the word a tub and then is filled. Third form of verb will be used of fill, and then with water, not by water, because it would not make any sense. So it all depends upon the subject of the sentence. Here we have a chart explaining all the rules that we have just studied. The first is the placement, changing the placement of subject and object. The subject would come in place of object and object would come in place of subject. Second is place the active sentence subject into a phrase beginning with the preposition by. It means that we have to use a preposition by. Then we have add a form of the auxiliary verb be to the main verb and changes the main verb's form. It means that the use of third form of verb. So what we have to do is we have to change the place of subject and object. Then we have to use a preposition by or to or with depending upon the subject, and then we should use the third form of verb in order to change the active voice into passive one. To change a passive voice sentence into an active voice sentence, simply reverse the steps shown before or above. For example, move the passive sentence subject into the active sentence direct object slot. It means that what you have to do is you have to interchange the positions of subject and object. The object will come in place of subject and the subject will come in the place of object. Next is remove the auxiliary verb be from the main verb and change main verb's form if needed. It means that the auxiliary verb that we use when we change a sentence from active to passive would be removed, and we should always and also remove the third form of verb, and we would use the form of verb according to that sentence. And then is place the passive sentence object of the preposition by into the subject slot. It means that we will remove the word by. So it's all about changing the passive voice into active voice.